My name is Ethan Miller, and at the time my life changed, I was only 26 years old. I wasn't rich, I wasn't special. I was just an average guy living paycheck to paycheck in a small rented apartment, trying to survive a normal life. The only person who ever truly understood me was my grandfather, Robert Miller. Grandpa Robert was a quiet man. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words always carried meaning. To the rest of the family, he was just an old man with money and property. To me, he was a teacher, a guide, and in many ways, the father I never had. When my parents divorced, I spent most of my childhood at his farmhouse. That was where he taught me to read, to think for myself, and to understand people. He used to tell me one thing again and again. Money doesn't change people, Ethan. It reveals them. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. My Uncle Mark and my Aunt Linda only visited Grandpa on holidays. They came with fake smiles, empty hugs, and one question that never changed. "Have you updated your will yet, Dad?" I could see it. Grandpa could see it too. They weren't there for him. They were there for what he owned. One night, my phone rang. It was Grandpa. His voice sounded weaker than I had ever heard before. "Ethan, can you come tomorrow?" I didn't hesitate. I drove to his farmhouse first thing in the morning. He was lying in bed, surrounded by old documents and a sealed envelope on the table beside him. He looked at me and said quietly, "The people who chase money never see the truth." That was the last conversation we ever had. 2 days later, my grandfather passed away. At the funeral, the entire family cried, but something felt wrong. Their tears felt rehearsed. Their eyes kept searching each other's faces, as if they were already counting what they would receive. I expected nothing. I was just the grandson. A week later, we sat in a lawyer's office. The room was tense. The lawyer, Daniel Brooks, opened the will and began to read. "All properties, land, investments, and assets totaling approximately $3.4 million are to be inherited by my grandson, Ethan Miller." The room went completely silent. I thought I had misheard. Uncle Mark stood up, furious. "Is this a joke, right?" The lawyer calmly shook his head. "The will is legal." Then he added one more sentence. "There is also a personal letter addressed only to Ethan." My hands were shaking as I opened it. It read, "Ethan, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I know my family will hate you for this, but I wanted everything I built to go to the one person who saw me as a human being, not a bank account." Tears fell onto the paper. And that was only the beginning. From that day forward, everything changed. My family stopped speaking to me. Some called me greedy. Others accused me of manipulation. But Grandpa hadn't only left me his wealth. He had left me secrets, conditions, and a truth hidden inside the farmhouse. A truth that would destroy what was left of my family. The farmhouse felt different when I returned alone. For the first time in my life, it was legally mine, yet it didn't feel like a victory. The silence inside those walls was heavy, almost suffocating. Every creaking floorboard reminded me of Grandpa's footsteps. Every shadow felt like a memory watching me. I spent the first night sitting in the living room, staring at the fireplace where he used to sit and read. I couldn't sleep. My phone kept buzzing with missed calls and messages from relatives I suddenly no longer mattered to. By morning, I decided to go through his study. Grandpa was a very organized man. Every drawer had a purpose, every shelf a system. That's when I noticed something odd. One of the bookshelves didn't align properly with the wall. It was slightly forward, almost unnoticeable unless you were looking closely. When I pushed it, the shelf moved. Behind it was a narrow door. My heart started racing. I had lived in this farmhouse for years and never knew this door existed. The air inside was cold and smelled of dust and old paper. A staircase led down into darkness. I turned on my phone flashlight and slowly walked down. The basement was larger than I expected. There were metal cabinets, locked boxes, and stacks of folders neatly arranged on a long table. This wasn't a storage room. This was an archive. I opened the first folder. It contained documents, bank statements, old photographs, and handwritten notes. As I read through them, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Grandpa had been financially supporting the family for decades. Every failed business Uncle Mark had started, every debt Aunt Linda had hidden, every emergency loan they never repaid. There were notes in Grandpa's handwriting beside each file. Promised to pay back, never did. Said it was for the children, bought a new car instead. Last chance, no more help. My chest felt tight. This wasn't generosity. This was exploitation. Then I found another envelope with my name on it. Inside was a short letter. Ethan, if you're reading this, you found the basement. I didn't hide this from you. I hid it for you. You deserve to know the truth about this family. At the bottom was a single line that made my blood run cold. Be careful. They will not let this go. That same night, my phone rang. It was Uncle Mark. His voice was calm, almost friendly, but I could hear something else underneath it. Ethan, he said, we need to talk, face to face. I looked around the empty farmhouse and suddenly realized something terrifying. Grandpa knew this would happen, and he had prepared me for it. I agreed to meet Uncle Mark the next afternoon. We chose a small cafe in town, the kind of place where people pretended not to listen while hearing everything. I arrived early and took a seat near the window. My hands were steady, but my mind wasn't. Uncle Mark walked in 10 minutes late. He looked tired, but not sad. There was no grief in his eyes, only calculation. He sat across from me and forced a smile. Ethan, he said, I'm glad you came. I nodded. You said you wanted to talk. He sighed dramatically, as if the weight of the entire family rested on his shoulders. You know your grandfather wasn't thinking clearly near the end, he began. He was confused, influenced. We're worried you took advantage of that. I felt my jaw tighten. I didn't ask for anything. He made his choice. Mark leaned forward. That money doesn't belong to you alone. It's family money. I looked him straight in the eyes. Then why did he leave it to me? For a moment, he had no answer. Then his tone changed. Listen, he said quietly, we can fix this. You give us our fair share, and we make all of this go away. No lawyers, no drama. I thought about the files in the basement, the unpaid loans, the lies. No, I said. His smile disappeared. You're making a mistake, he warned. People can get ugly when they feel cheated. I stood up, left some cash on the table, and walked out without saying another word. That evening, I returned to the farmhouse. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something was wrong. The front door was slightly open. I froze. I was certain I had locked it. Inside, drawers were pulled out, paper scattered across the floor. Someone had been searching for something. I went straight to the study. The bookshelf had been moved. The hidden door was open. My heart was pounding as I rushed down to the basement. Several folders were missing. Not random ones, specific ones, the ones detailing the largest amounts of money Grandpa had loaned to my uncle and aunt. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went straight to lawyer Daniel Brooks. After listening carefully, he looked at me and said something I hadn't expected. Ethan, this isn't just an inheritance issue anymore, he said. This is a legal shield your grandfather built for you." He slid a document across the desk, a clause in the will. If any family member attempted to intimidate, threaten, or unlawfully interfere with the estate, they would permanently forfeit any right to challenge the will. Grandpa had anticipated everything. That afternoon, I received a message from Aunt Linda. "We know what you're hiding. This isn't over." I stared at the screen, feeling something new settle in my chest. Not fear, resolve. Because for the first time, I understood the truth. My grandfather didn't just leave me his wealth. He left me a test, and my family was already failing it. I didn't go back to the farmhouse that night. Daniel's words echoed in my head, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt exposed. Whatever Grandpa had built for me wasn't just an inheritance. It was a trap designed to reveal the truth. The next morning, I filed a police report. I didn't accuse anyone by name. I didn't need to. I simply reported a break-in and missing documents. The officer listened carefully, took notes, and promised to follow up. By the afternoon, my phone was blowing up. Uncle Mark left 3 voicemails. Aunt Linda sent a long message filled with anger and half-hidden threats. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to check in. I ignored them all. 2 days later, the police called me back. They had fingerprints, and they weren't mine. The officer's tone was calm but firm when he said, "Mr. Miller, one of the prints matches a family member with a prior record for financial fraud." My stomach dropped. Uncle Mark. That evening, I received another call, this time from Mark himself. He didn't bother pretending anymore. "You went to the police?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I protected myself, something you never did for Grandpa." There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "If this goes public, the whole family goes down with me." I thought of the basement files, the lies, the years of manipulation. "Then maybe it should," I said, and hung up. A week later, the will challenge was officially filed, but it didn't last long. Daniel invoked the clause Grandpa had written, the one that stripped any challenger of their rights if they interfered with the estate. With the police report and fingerprints, the case collapsed almost immediately. The story spread fast. Friends stopped calling my uncle, business partners distanced themselves, relatives who once demanded their share suddenly went silent. One evening, I returned to the farmhouse for the first time since everything exploded. In Grandpa's study, I opened the last locked drawer I had avoided until now. Inside was a small wooden box. It contained a single key and a final letter. "Ethan, if you've made it this far, you already know the truth. This family was built on my work, but it was broken by entitlement. The key is not for something valuable, it's for something freeing." The key belonged to a storage unit on the edge of town. Inside were boxes filled with journals, Grandpa's personal journals. Page after page documented decades of sacrifices, betrayals, and silent endurance. The last entry stopped me cold. "I stayed quiet so Ethan wouldn't grow up in chaos. Now he's strong enough to face it." I closed the journal and finally understood. Grandpa hadn't protected the family, he had protected me, and in doing so, he had ensured the truth would survive him. The journals changed everything. After reading them, I stopped feeling guilty. Every doubt I had carried since the will reading finally disappeared. Grandpa hadn't been cruel, he had been careful. I spent weeks going through his writings, learning about the man he truly was. He had built his wealth slowly, honestly, and alone. And for years, he had watched his own children turn that success into entitlement. When the legal matters were finally settled, I made my decision. I sold the majority of the assets. The land, the extra properties, the investments. I let them go, one by one. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I kept only the farmhouse. The farmhouse wasn't valuable because of money. It was valuable because of memories. Uncle Mark tried to contact me one last time. His message was short, desperate, and full of regret. I never replied. Some conversations are better left unfinished. Aunt Linda moved away shortly after. The family gathering stopped. The name Miller quietly faded from town gossip. And for the first time, there was peace. I used part of the money to start a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name for kids who grew up in broken homes just like I did. I didn't announce it. I didn't want credit. That felt right. One evening, months later, I sat on the farmhouse porch as the sun went down. The fields were quiet. The world felt balanced again. I thought about something Grandpa once told me as a kid. Real wealth, he said, is waking up without fear. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The inheritance didn't make me rich. It made me free.